The Mac Pro line is a series of Intel Xeon Euro-based workstation and server computers manufactured by Apple Incorporated. The Mac Pro, in most configurations and in terms of speed and performance, is the most powerful computer that Apple offers. It is the high-end model of the three desktop computers in the current Mac lineup, the other two being the iMac and Mac Mini. The first-generation Mac Pro came in a rectangular tower case which outwardly resembled the last version of the Power Mac G5, and had similar expansion capabilities. An Intel-based replacement for the PowerPC-based Power Mac G5 machines had been expected for some time before the Mac Pro was formally announced on August 7, 2006 at the annual Apple Worldwide Developers Conference. The first Mac Pro was based on dual-core Xeon Woodcrest processors. It was replaced by a dual Quad-core Xeon Clovertown model on April 4, 2007, and again on January 8, 2008 by a dual Quad-core Xeon Harpertown model. The 2012 Mac Pro was largely based on a model that was announced on July 27, 2010. It features Nehalem Westmere architecture's Intel Xeon processors. They offer options of up to 12 processing cores, up to 4 optional 2 TB hard disk drives / 512 GB solid-state drives and ATI Radeon HD 5770/5870 graphics. The second-generation Mac Pro was announced at the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference opening keynote on June 10, 2013. In a radical departure from first-generation's rectangular tower case, the redesigned Mac Pro is shaped like a cylinder and takes up about 1/8 the volume of previous models. Beyond form, the machine supports up to a 12-core Xeon CPU and 4 1866 MHz DDR3 RAM modules, as well as dual GPUs and PCIe-based flash storage. Apple claims that the new Mac Pro achieves twice the performance of the last model. The second-generation model was released on December 19, 2013. First generation, an Intel-based replacement for the Power Mac G5 had long been expected prior to the release of the Mac Pro. The iMac, Mac Mini, MacBook, and MacBook Pro had moved to an Intel-based architecture starting in January 2006, leaving the Power Mac G5 as the only machine in the Mac lineup still based on the PowerPC processor architecture Apple had used since 1993. Speculation about the G5's eventual replacement was common. Rumors initially expected the machine to differ physically from the existing G5 and considered a number of different possible internal configurations based on different chipsets, but the coincidence of Intel releasing a new Core 2 Euro-based Xeon workstation processor platform just prior to the 2006 Apple Worldwide Developers Conference made it fairly obvious that the resulting machine would be based on it. Even the naming was obvious. Apple had dropped the term Power from the other machines in their lineup, and started using Pro on their higher-end laptop offerings. As such, the name Mac Pro was widely used before the machine was announced. The Mac Pro was a workstation similar to other Unix workstations such as those previously manufactured by Sun Microsystems. Although the high-end technical market has not traditionally been an area of strength for Apple, the company has been positioning itself as a leader in non-linear digital editing for high-definition video, which demands storage and memory far in excess of a general desktop machine. Additionally, the codecs used in these applications are generally processor-intensive and highly threadable, speeding up almost linearly with additional processor cores. Apple's previous machine aimed at this market, the Power Mac G5, had up to 2 dual-core processors, but lacked the storage expansion capabilities of the newer design. In general, the Mac Pro had been well received in the press. The combination of high performance, reasonable expandability, very quiet operation and the quality of its mechanical design makes it routinely appear as the comparison system against which other systems are measured. The Xeon platform is, however, Intel's a high-end Euro system and not aimed at more general-purpose use. Nevertheless, current-generation Xeon CPUs are priced competitively in comparison to high-end desktop platforms, allowing Apple to sell a very powerful system at prices that are considered quite competitive, especially when compared to other Unix workstations. Original marketing materials for the Mac Pro generally referred to the middle-of-the-line model with two dual-core 2.66 GHz processors. Previously, Apple featured the base model with the words starting at, or from, when describing the pricing, but the online US Apple Store listed the Mac Pro at $2,499, the price for the mid-range model. The system could be configured at $2,299, much more comparable with the former base model dual-core G5 at $1,999, although offering considerably more processing power. Post-revision, the default configurations for the Mac Pro includes one Quad-core Xeon 3500 at 2.66 GHz or two Quad-core Xeon 5500s at 2.26 GHz each. Like its predecessor, the Power Mac G5, the pre-2013 Mac Pro was Apple's only desktop with standard expansion slots for graphics adapters and other expansion cards. Apple received criticism after an incremental upgrade to the Mac Pro line following the 2012 WWDC. The line received more default memory and increased processor speed but still used Intel's older Westmere EP processors instead of the newer E5 series. The line also lacked current technologies like SATA 3, USB 3, and Thunderbolt, the last of which had been added to every other Macintosh at that point. An email from Apple CEO Tim Cook promised a more significant update to the line in 2013. Apple stopped shipping the first-generation Mac Pro in Europe on March 1, 2013 after an amendment to a safety regulation left the professional Mac non-compliant. The last day to order was February 18, 2013. The first-generation Mac Pro was removed from Apple's online store, following unveiling of the redesigned second-generation Mac Pro at a media event on October 22, 2013. Processors: the 2010 and later Mac Pro systems were available with one or two processors with options giving 4, 8, or 12 cores. As an example, the 8-core standard configuration Mac Pro used two Quad-core A8 Intel E5620 Xeon processors at 2.4 GHz, but could be configured with two hexa-core Intel Xeon processor X5670 at 2.93 GHz. Since the processor S are socketed, the processor S could be easily removed and replaced with compatible 64-bit Intel Xeon processors. There was a limited universe of Xeon processor types suitable for an upgrade, and these processors differed with each model of Mac Pro, so a user must know the proper socket type, Mac Pro system type, and other processor specifications before attempting an upgrade. Memory: the original Mac Pro's main memory used 667 MHz DDR2 ECC FBDIMMs. The early 2008 model used 800 MHz ECC DDR2 FBDIMMs. The 2010 and onward Mac Pro used 1066 MHz DDR3 ECC DIMMs for the standard models, and 1333 MHz DDR3 ECC DIMMs for systems configured with 2.66 GHz or faster processors. In the original and 2008 models, these modules are installed in pairs, one each on two riser cards. The cards have 4 DIMM slots each, allowing a total of 32 GB of memory to be installed. Notably, due to its FBDIMM architecture, installing more RAM in the Mac Pro will improve its memory bandwidth, but may also increase its memory latency. With a simple install of a single FBDIMM, the peak bandwidth is 8 GB per second, but this can increase to 16 GB per second by installing two FBDIMMs, one on each of the two buses, which is the default configuration from Apple. While electrically the FBDIMMs are standard, for pre-2009 Mac Pro models Apple specifies larger than normal heat sinks on the memory modules. Problems have been reported by users who have used third-party RAM with normal-size FBDIMM heat sinks. 2009 and later Mac Pro computers do not require memory modules with heat sinks. Hard drives. The Mac Pro had room for 4 internal 3.5 inches SATA 300 hard drives in 4 internal bays. The hard drives were mounted on individual trays by captive screws. A set of 4 drive trays was supplied with each machine. Adding hard drives to the system did not require cables to be attached, as the drive was connected to the system simply by being inserted into the corresponding drive slot. A case lock on the back of the system locked the disk trays into their positions. The Mac Pro also supported serial ATA solid-state drives in the 4 hard drive bays via an SSD to hard drive sled adapter, and by third-party solutions for earlier models. Various 2.5-inch SSD drive capacities and configurations were available as options. The Mac Pro was also available with an optional hardware RAID card. With the addition of a SAS controller card or SAS RAID controller card, SAS drives could be directly connected to the system's SATA ports. 2 optical drive bays were provided, each with a corresponding SATA port and an Ultra ATA/100 port. The Mac Pro had 1 PATA port and could support 2 PATA devices in the optical drive bays. It had a total of 6 SATA ports. 4 were connected to the system's drive bays, and 2 were not connected. The extra SATA ports could be put into service through the use of aftermarket extender cables to connect internal optical drives, or to provide eSATA ports with the use of an eSATA bulkhead connector. However, the 2 extra SATA ports were unsupported and disabled under boot camp. A built-to-order Mac Pro could be configured with up to 8 TB of storage or 2 TB. Expansion cards. The 2008 model had 2 PCI Express 2.0 expansion slots and 2 PCI Express 1.1 slots, providing them with up to 300 W of power in total. The first slot was double-wide and intended to hold the main video card, arranged with an empty area the width of a normal card beside it to leave room for the large coolers modern cards often use. In most machines, one slot would be blocked by the cooler. Instead of the tiny screws typically used to fasten the cards to the case, in the Mac Pro a single bar held the cards in place, which is itself held in place by 2 captive thumb screws that can be loosened by hand without tools and will not fall out of the case. On the original Mac Pro introduced in August 2006, the PCIe slots can be configured individually to give more bandwidth to devices that require it, with a total of 40 lanes, or 13 GB per second total throughput. When running Mac OS X, the Mac Pro did not support SLI or ATI Crossfire, limiting its ability to use the latest high-end gaming video card products. However, individuals have reported success with both Crossfire and SLI installations when running Windows XP, as SLI and Crossfire compatibility is largely a function of software. The bandwidth allocation of the PCIe slots can be configured via the expansion slot utility included with Mac OS X only on the August 2006 Mac Pro. The early 2008 and later Mac Pros had PCIe slots hardwired as follows: external connectivity. For external connectivity, the Mac Pro included 5 USB 2.0 and 4 FireWire 800 ports. Networking was supported with 2 built-in Gigabit Ethernet ports. 802.11 Again, Wi-Fi support required an optional module in the mid-2006, early 2008 and early 2009 models, whereas in the 2010 model and later Wi-Fi was standard. Bluetooth also required an optional module in the mid-2006 model, but was standard in the early 2008 and newer models. Displays were supported by 1 or more PCIe graphics cards. More recent cards featured 2 mini DisplayPort connectors and 1 dual-link digital visual interface port, with various configurations of on-card graphics memory available. Digital audio and analog 3.5mm stereo mini jacks for sound in and out were included, the latter becoming available on both the front and back of the case. Unlike other Mac computers, the Mac Pro did not include an infrared receiver. Beginning with Mac OS X Leopard, front row could be accessed on the Mac Pro using the Command Escape keystroke. Case. From 2006 through 2012, the exterior of the Mac Pro's aluminum case was very similar to that of the Power Mac G5, with the exception of an additional optical drive bay, and a new arrangement of I/O ports on both the front and the back. The case could be opened by operating a single lever on the back, which unlocked one of the 2 sides of the machine, as well as the drive bays. All of the expansion slots for memory, PCIe cards and drives could be accessed with the side panel removed and no tools were required for installation. The Xeon processors generated much less heat than the previous dual-core G5s, so the size of the internal cooling devices had been reduced significantly. This allowed the interior to be rearranged, leaving more room at the top of the case and thereby allowing the drives to double in number. Less heat also meant less air to move out of the case for cooling during normal operations. The Mac Pro was very quiet in normal operation, quieter than the much noisier Power Mac G5, and proved difficult to measure using common sound pressure level meters. Specifications: Second generation, Apple unveiled a completely redesigned Mac Pro during the WWDC 2013 keynote. Apple Senior Vice President of Marketing Phil Schiller presented a sneak peek video of the product, a very unusual move for the company. The video revealed an overhauled case design, a polished reflective aluminum cylinder built around a central thermal dissipation core and vented by a single fan, which pulls air from under the case, through the core, and out the top of the case. The model is assembled in Austin, Texas, on a highly automated line. Reviews of the new design have generally had very high ratings, but caveats are mentioned in almost every case. The performance is widely lauded, especially handling video tasks on the dual GPU units, with some reviewers noting the ability to apply dozens of filters to real-time 4K video. Disk performance, connected via PCIe, is also widely mentioned as a strong point. However, most reviews also note the lack of internal expandability, and question the currently limited offerings via the Thunderbolt port. Hardware: the 2013 Mac Pro has a vastly redesigned configuration of ports. The Mac Pro has an HDMI 1.4 port, dual gigabit Ethernet ports, 6 Thunderbolt 2 ports, 4 USB 3 ports, and combined digital mini Toslink optical/analog 3.5mm stereo mini jacks for sound in and out. The Thunderbolt 2 ports support up to 36 Thunderbolt devices and can support up to 3 simultaneous 4K displays. This design requires 2 GPUs to support the 7 display outputs. The I/O panel is illuminated when the unit senses it has been moved to make it easier for the user to see the ports. The new Mac Pro no longer has FireWire 800 ports, dedicated digital audio in-out ports, a SuperDrive, or a DVI port. The new Mac Pro removes the ability to replace hard drives by foregoing the 4 3.5-inch drive bays for proprietary PCIe channel flash storage. It also removes the ability to add PCIe cards internally. Apple's website mentions only RAM as user serviceable, though third-party tear-downs show most components can be removed and replaced. A lock switch on the aluminum casing allows for easy access to the internals, and components are secured with standard screws. The flash storage and GPUs use proprietary connectors and are specially sized to fit into the enclosure. Unlike the rest of the Macintosh line, the CPU is not soldered to the logic board and can be replaced with another LGA 2011 socket processor, including processor options not offered by Apple. Specifications: Mac Pro Server. On November 5, 2010, Apple introduced the Mac Pro Server, which officially replaced the ZF line of Apple servers as of January 31, 2011. The Mac Pro Server came with an unlimited Mac OS X server license and an Intel Xeon 2.8 GHz quad-core processor, with 8 GB of DDR3 RAM. In mid-2012, the Mac Pro Server was upgraded to an Intel Xeon 3.2 GHz quad-core processor with 8 GB of DDR3 RAM. The Mac Pro Server was discontinued on October 22, 2013, with the introduction of the second-generation cylinder Mac Pro. However, OS X Server can be purchased from the Mac App Store on the new Mac Pro. Operating systems: the Mac Pro comes with the BIOS accessory FI 1.1 and handles booting differently from the conventional BIOS-based PC. Apple's Boot Camp provides BIOS backwards compatibility, allowing dual and triple boot configurations. These operating systems are installable on Intel x86-based Apple computers, OS X 10.4.7 and later, Microsoft Windows XP, Vista, and Windows 7 32-bit and 64-bit. other x86 operating systems such as Linux x86, Solaris, and BSD. This is made possible by the presence of an x86 Intel architecture as provided by the CPU and the BIOS emulation Apple has provided on top of EFI. Installing any additional operating system other than Windows is not supported by Apple, because the Boot Camp drivers are Windows only. It is often possible to achieve full or nearly full compatibility with another OS by using third-party drivers. There are a number of challenges which must be addressed when trying to establish a multi-booting configuration on a single hard drive that uses the new GPT partitioning standard that Mac OS takes advantage of at the same time as the MBR, which is commonly used by Windows and Linux. One must synchronize their GPT and MBR partition tables multiple times during the setup of such configurations. The key challenge is that a maximum of 4 partitions can be made on any such hard drive. This is because logical and extended MBR partitions are not possible, which means that more than 4 partitions cannot be referenced for the MBR component of the configuration. Thus, having more partitions would force MBR and GPT to have differing partitioning schemes. The disk utility command line application in Mac OS X can non-destructively resize a single partitioned HFS plus formatted volume to a scheme usable for dual triple boot configurations with BIOS MBR. Add-on hardware compatibility. For 2006 and 2008 models, Apple recommends an Apple-specified heatsink on each memory DIMM for cooling, and the required on-chip thermal manager may shut down memory, or increase fan speed, if it starts to overheat. Several third-party, self-installable memory upgrades that include Apple-specified heatsinks are available from companies such as Crucial and Otherworld Computing. In contrast, the 2009 Mac Pro with Nehalem processors uses unbuffered memory with no heatsinks. The Mac Pro, as with other Mac platforms, requires Mac OS X firmware. That is to say, a PCIe video card designed exclusively for other operating systems will not work properly under Mac OS X without appropriate drivers or firmware. However, they will work under the operating systems they were designed for, if installed via Boot Camp or other means. Some video cards and other hardware accessories not marketed for Macs can nonetheless be made compatible through flashing drivers from either similar Mac hardware or with a custom firmware onto non-supported hardware. Also, AMD released the ATI Radeon HD 3870, which is compatible with both Mac Pros and PCs from other manufacturers. The Radeon HD 6XXX series of graphics processors, also released by AMD in 2010, will work without being flashed under Mac OS X if the user has installed drivers from Mac OS X line. As of the release of Mountain Lion, most PCIe video cards work natively without flashing their firmware. With non-Mac specific cards, the boot screen and Apple logo do not display at boot up, but then the system is at full operation once booting proceeds. References. External links: Mac Pro, a Euro official site.